to help support a variety of faculty in different modalities. So let me put my screen up here to share. Oh, backwards, too fast. Let's try again. So conference talk today, flexible flipping, designing curriculum for multiple delivery methods. Like I said, my name is Sherry McLean. I teach at Lake Washington Institute of Technology, which is up in Kirkland, Washington. Most famous recently, I guess, for being Campus Zero, as the pandemic outbreak was kind of in our backyard, and our nursing students were at some of those initial nursing home areas. It's a fabulous college. It's small, and so as a faculty member, I'm also doing a lot of instructional design. I've been teaching online for about 15 years, and most recently have really caught the flipping bug, and am excited to share that with you today. A little bit of an agenda here and a walkthrough, just a quick discussion about what flipped learning is. We're going to talk about some processes in breaking it down into 4 steps to help with that instructional design in terms of how to cause that flip to happen. And then we'll spend some time talking about how preparing a flipped curriculum can really be the best starting point if you need to offer a class with a lot of multiple modalities. So we're talking hybrid, synchronous remote, right? Like we've all ended up having to do, fully online. If you start with that flipped curriculum, it's super easy to adapt all of the work that you've done into these different modalities. So it becomes a really great design strategy that you can use when you're doing a variety of redesigns. And then I'll wrap up with some wows and warnings, a lot of love for all of the things that I've been doing and for this process, and a few of the lessons that I've learned. Of course, none of us are perfect as we're designing our new sets and series here. So I'm hoping to have 10 or 15 minutes at the end where you guys can ask any questions, follow up, or share your own experiences. I know I am certainly not the first person in the world to try any of this stuff. And so I'm happy to share my expertise and very willing to listen to yours as well. So first question here, what is flipped learning? There really is more to it than you think. Most people say, ooh, flipped learning. We watch the videos at home, we come to school and do the classroom, or come to class and do the homework. And there actually is quite a bit more to the design and to the concept. The Flipped Learning Network is a great resource that I used as I was kind of getting started here. But here is a long, tedious slide that I'm going to read in terms of a definition. And the reason is that there are just some really great big terms in here that have a lot of meaning. So flipped learning is a pedagogical approach in which the direct instruction moves from the group learning space to the individual learning space. And the resulting group space is then transformed into a dynamic, interactive learning environment where the educator guides students as they apply concepts and engage creatively in the subject matter. So how does all of this work? Big important terms here, talking about that group learning space where in our more traditional look, right, we're looking at what's in the actual classroom, and the individual learning spaces where the student is doing those individual readings, learnings, and things like that. So we're really rethinking this group learning space and the individual learning space and coming to terms with what is the best way to deliver this material and the best way to deliver these things to our students as we go through. Really trying to come up with a very dynamic environment within that group space and really changing the role of an educator from a presenter of information to more of a guide, a supporter, and a cheerleader as our students engage creatively in whatever subject we're doing. Like I said, I am a math instructor and a lot of my experience is in that department, but I think that these principles really apply in any type of subject matter or learning space. As we're thinking of flipped learning, these are kind of those main pillars, the things that we're doing to really engage students using this new method. So we're talking about having a more flexible environment. We're talking about changing the learning culture of our classroom. My favorite is the I here in the flip, the intentional content. Designing for a flipped classroom is an opportunity to really, really reevaluate what's important, what your students need to do, what you want them to do, and the skills that you want to develop. And the last one is kind of changing our role as instructors into more of professional educators. And this new modality of this flipped design really allows us to rethink our role as experts in our field and as supporters of our students. When I initially did my first flipped classroom, it was about 6 years ago, and we're a small college, and we have our average age of student coming in is in their low 30s. So we have a lot of people that are doing worker replacement, transferring skills, parents that are coming back to work after child rearing, things like that. So we have a really big variety, and we have a good running start population where we have high school students taking college courses. We've got a really wide variety of people kind of coming in. And so I was teaching a developmental algebra catch-up class to try to get people into and ready for that college level course. And as I was teaching this class, I really found that I had a lot of confusion from some students and a lot of boredom from other students. It was really hard to kind of teach to the middle in this particular case because the background of students coming in was so diverse. And so as I started looking at how can I reach these students the best, I found that this opportunity to flip really became an appealing concept. Because what I was able to do is the students could watch those lecture materials ahead of time. And then when they came to class, everybody had the same vocabulary background. If it was something easy for students, they could skim through the material. If it was something difficult, they could rewatch the videos multiple times. And then when they come to class to work on problems, projects, and applications, they at least all have a common vocabulary, and I don't have to explain that from scratch. I was able to focus on those fundamentals in the individual group space, or in the individual learning space, excuse me, so that the group learning space then became a valuable place for interaction. Okay, so now that we have a little bit of that background idea here of what is that flip, it's really about changing that concept from where the individual work happens and where the group work happens, and the roles of both the students and the teachers in that. So here, what I'd like to kind of walk through are 4 steps that helped me design a flip, and really thinking about this intentionality and in terms of writing things. Like I said, we're a small college. We don't get a lot in terms of instructional design assistance. We definitely have some good professional development training, but our faculty curriculum writers are definitely faculty. And so a lot of different things that I found were super helpful for me moving forward. So step 1 here, the first thing is identifying the purpose. This is where that whole intentionality really comes into play. What we're looking for here is when you're starting a new curriculum design, and this is a lot of those universal design principles and stuff like that some of you may be familiar with, but start with thinking, at the end of this class, what do I want students to be able to do? And then once you decide what those are, then we can back up. By the end of this lesson, what will students be able to do? And I found that it's really incredibly valuable to change that vocabulary, not to what will the students know, but what will the students be able to do? What are those skills that you want them to walk away with? How do you want them to be able to present their knowledge in their future careers and in their work? As educators, most of us have seen way too much of Bloom's taxonomy, but this concept of thinking about both lower level skills and upper level thinking skills really helps to determine how you want to deal with the time that you have in class. Simple things like recalling facts and concepts, basic definitions, some preliminary application sets. All of those are really great things that our students don't need us to do, right? They don't need to be spending class time and to really work on these lower level skills. In general, right, we would teach all of these basics right at the very beginning, right? We'd be teaching all of this stuff right here. And then we would send them home to analyze, evaluate, and create. And to be honest, this is the place where our students can most benefit from our expertise, from our guiding questions, from all of these other things. These lower ones, remembering, understanding, and those beginnings of applying, right? Those are things that we as instructors sound like broken records, right? I have been teaching developmental mathematics courses. I started teaching middle school in 1997. Okay, so I have been teaching basic algebra skills for 20 years. And while I think my lessons are amazing, even to myself, I was like, wow, I am teaching this exact same lesson. And so we can record that, right? We can show those and then use our time as professional educators to really help our students shine in analyzing material and evaluating the concepts and creating new and original work. And that's where the value of the class time can be. So by thinking about what we want students to be able to do, we really want to try to fill things in at all of these levels, right, within Bloom's taxonomy. And so think about what can they do, what can our students do outside of class time, and then how can they best take advantage of the group learning space that we have. Be specific and measurable. We all have our favorite learning objectives lessons that we get hammered from administration in terms of being able to track things. But to be honest, it's super helpful in our design, right? We want to know what our students should be able to know. We want to be specific about what skills we want them to develop and look for ways that we can measure and talk about those. When we're talking about flipping, really what we're talking about is a pre-class experience and then an in-class experience. So as we're looking at kind of our step 2 here, we want to really be focusing on what are these pre-class experiences. These are the things that they're doing offline, and really think about these as doing lower level learning outcomes. Consider the different resources, practice exercises, activities, things that students can do on their own and focus on their own. These are really kind of those thinking points, those basics, those fundamentals, the vocabulary, having different ways that we can do that. It's not all about every single thing that you ever teach is now in a recorded lecture, and then every single thing that we do in class is a problem application group activity. We can still teach in class, but we want to save those in-class teaching moments where we can really be that professional educator focusing on those higher level learning outcomes within the class time. So if there are some topics where you've got to pull lots of information together, those are good in-class experiences. So think about if you're pulling things together, let's get all those individual pieces first in a pre-class experience. One of the biggest things here that I have found is coming up with ways and strategies to hold students accountable for the pre-class experience. This is really where a lot of people shy away from the concept of a flipped design, because they're like, students don't do the homework. What if they don't ever listen to the lesson? And so you really do have to come up with strategies for holding students accountable. And we'll talk about that a little bit here next. So we really want to make these pre-class activity expectations very clear. What should our students be focusing on while they're watching the videos? Be specific. Really, and I have made all these mistakes. This is why these are my best practices, right? But don't just give the students a video list to watch. Give them instructions about what they should be doing while they are watching those videos. What should they focus on? Give them some questions to think about as they're watching the videos. Do you want them to think about these questions before, during, or after the videos? Give them some guidance. In terms of communicating with my classes, I found that students were really bad at taking notes in terms of mathematical concepts and different things like that. So I developed, in terms of my flipped curriculum, I developed a workbook that they use in conjunction with the videos. And I have every problem that we go through in the videos written out with space for students to come through and solve those problems along with me while I'm teaching those. What's the accountability? Well, they need to bring or show me that they took those notes. So in a virtual situation, they'll take pictures and say, hey, here's my notes from watching the videos. That gives them some accountability and assignments. And of course, you know, in the reality of our world, if there aren't points associated with something, if it's optional, students aren't going to do it, right? The last thing is make sure that you're very clear about when and how they should turn the assignments in. Laying out all of that information is just really, you know, you want to make sure that all of this is done and explain why that is going to be important for when they come back into class, into the group space in terms of what's happening. So explain how that work is helping them be successful in class. I love this. Barbie Honeycutt is one of the people behind some of that Flip network. But students need to see the value of preparing for class with the pre-class work. If they think that they can get by without doing it, they're going to. And so really being able to hold students accountable for that. Don't give in and reteach the material if they didn't do the assignment, right? Send them back to do that and then support them in their work. So kind of avoiding that tendency to overgive and forgive them for not doing those pre-work assignments. We really want to make sure that we're not just doing the same thing again in class, or our students are just going to stop doing the pre-work and we'll lose the magic power of that in-class group time. So what's the next thing? Once you've kind of identified pre-class assignments, the next thing that we really want to do is identify and work on in-class experiences. And this is what is just an incredible benefit of the flip. We're able to focus on higher level learning outcomes. Sometimes students are just, for me, they're working on a homework problem. They're working on a set of things. But once they come to class, we can talk about tying all those pieces together. We can do some more analysis. We can say, okay, well, why would you do one method versus another method? Let's talk about that in a setting. Or what is there in the situation that would clue you into a particular problem solving pathway, right? So being able to focus on those learning outcomes and really saving that in-class time for those. Let's not spend it on definitions, right? Let's really focus on bringing that material together. Think about conceptual activities, think about problems, make sure that groups input improves the students' abilities to achieve outcomes. If you have a project that you're having students do in groups, make sure that there is a benefit from working in the group. It's improving the students' abilities. It's contributing to other skills that we want our students to have, right? We're developing communication. In my case, you know, mathematical communication. Let's talk about how do you justify and support a process or a belief that you have in a group setting. And so being able to make sure that it's something that there is some benefit from a group rather than just individual. If it's just an individual benefit and individuals working, you might as well have that be offline, right? The last part, so here are some of the best practices, some of the things that I found again over time by mistakes and things that went really well, right? Kind of those best practices for using the group space. Identifying and repairing misconceptions, right? Once you've taught something a couple of times, you know the places where students misunderstand things. You know where they make common problems. This group space is the time that you really want to address those. This is where you shine as an educator, right? I know misconceptions that you have, and I'm going to help you straighten those out here with the time that we're able to spend together. Participating in guided and collaborative activities, right? It's really hard in an individual space to learn how to do communication, to learn how to work together. And all of those are really important skills that our students need moving forward into the job force, regardless of what program they're moving into. The group space becomes a really good place where we can connect skills to more advanced situations. Most students don't see those connections. And so really focusing that group space time on establishing the connections becomes a very, very strong focus moving forward. Developing processes and practices. So help students see commonalities from one situation to another. When you're doing videos offline, especially when you're kind of marking them into, those short 3 to 5 minutes, or those short video times, if we have, sometimes the learning ends up feeling very blocked to our students, right? I know how to solve this kind of equation and I'm going to do these problems. I know how to deal with this situation and I'm going to write this response, right? As we go through, it ends up feeling very fragmented. And so using this group space to tie those pieces together, make sure they understand why one skill is important in another skill, or how all those pieces work together to solve an advanced situation, problem, or application, becomes a very important use of our time within this group space. Focusing on conceptual understanding, again, individual skills are really easy to develop offline. Coming up with that conceptual tie together becomes the best use of our time within the group space. The last part of developing a really good flipped curriculum is identifying a closing. How do you wrap up that group space time in class and send them on their way, right? So helping our students identify outcomes that they have achieved. What you have learned something, here is what you have learned, right? Having that type of an experience for students is really important. Sometimes they just get to the end of class and like, what's the point? Say, hey, you didn't do this before, but now you know how to do this. This is kind of where we are right now. These are some things that need some more work. I'm going to give you a little bit of activity outside of class to strengthen that, and we're going to come back and talk about this again next time. So kind of coming up with some sort of a closing thing there. Reviewing why the topic matters. There is nothing more motivating for students if we want to look for that intrinsic motivation for our students. It's because they know that what they're learning is meaningful. Don't forget that. Wrap up every class with that, right? Talk about why what we're doing is important for something that they care about, for their career, for their being a good citizen in life. Why does it matter? In terms of a closing, another good thing to do is to allow some time and space for self-reflection. A lot of elementary and middle schools I've learned a lot from in a college class, those concepts of like exit tickets, where at the end of class, think about what you've learned, maybe apply it in a set, allow students that self-reflection time and say, hey, what did you learn? What are you still having trouble with? Let's kind of focus on that. Or you can offer a preview for the next lesson. Here's a teaser about the connection. And so while you're outside of class, you can kind of pull these pieces together, because this is what we're going to be doing next. So being able to break up and use these different types of closings, and you can mix them up. They don't need to be the same every time, but have an intentional closing time. Set an alarm on your watch or on the computer to go off 7 minutes before class is over, or 5 minutes before class is over, so that you can actually have this wrap up experience for your students every time when you're dealing with a group space. So those are kind of the basics behind the design of that flipped classroom experience. Really thinking about what can students do in an individual space, what benefits are there in a group space, and thinking about breaking things down, not so much in terms of a video and a problem, but in lower level thinking skills and practices, and more collaborative learning experiences in more applications and connections, and spending our class time in that useful area and format. All right, so why would you flip? Why would you, if you're designing something, and again, So over the last 3 years, I've been doing a grant to change all of our developmental ed up through those kind of starting 100 level math classes to switch all of these to a flipped format. So I've been designing these on the outset, going through. I'm the math department chair, and why would I care about designing something that could be used in lots of different ways? Well, let's take a look at some different ones, some different modalities that we have and why we would do that. Parker J. Palmer wrote a book called The Courage to Teach. And my first year at my current institution at Lake Washington, we had a book club where we read this book and talked about teaching with colleagues. It was such an exciting and wonderful experience. But this quote here was something that struck me really hard. I've had a lot of good teachers over the years, and they've been very different from one another. They all had passion for what they were doing, but their styles were unique to them as individuals. And so as you're developing a curriculum, remembering that the faculty that are going to be using your developed materials are very different and unique in the ways that they present and the styles that they work. So being able to have a very versatile set of materials that your instructors can use in a variety of settings and in a variety of different modalities and methods is really positive and helps instructors feel like they are valuable in their methods of presentation, in their wherever they are in their growth as instructors and as educators. And having this flipped curriculum design and these types of materials available to share with other instructors that are going to be taking these on has a lot to do with those individual teaching styles, and flipped enables that. So let's start out with the first one, our traditional lecture. I don't know about you, but the pandemic has caused this picture here to give me great anxiety now. Like all these people in one room. But how can having a flipped curriculum design help an instructor that really shines in a traditional lecture environment? Well, in terms of a lesson outline, these workbooks that I would make to go along with the videos, my adjunct instructors would, if they really, really liked the traditional lecture format, they would use that as a model for what the lessons would be. Then what would the advantage of having all of those videos online? Well, we have materials to help students that are absent, right? Something legit in terms of going through and supporting that extra work. I have lots of students that work night shifts and then come to class at 9 a.m. and are not at their most alert, right? And in a traditional lecture, you're sunk if you aren't paying 100% attention 100% of the time, right? And that's just not really viable for any of us, right? You're probably dozing off already in this 50-minute presentation, right? No, I'm just kidding. But that concept of really being on the alert all the time, well, if you have these videos available offline, if someone misses class or even just missed class mentally, right, or want to review it one more time, they actually can get all of those steps back out on their own time. So having these flipped materials, even if the instructors don't say, watch the videos before you come to class, they can say, oh, if you missed class or you want to review this, here's some materials that are very structured and pertinent to the curriculum that we're doing. I really also love the concept of sharing a flipped curriculum with new instructors. They really are the most comfortable with these traditional lectures because that's what they've seen, right? That's what we all grew up with. And having really good group activities is a challenge to learn how to do well in a class. And so if you have some of those group activities designed for that group learning space, the instructor that's maybe teaching in a more traditional format can have opportunities to experiment. Okay, this one seems like something I can try. And so this actually, I have found, is helping a lot of instructors move from being super comfortable only in a traditional lecture where they're talking and their students are doing the homework at home. They're slowly being able to integrate and switch over their teaching modalities to experiment a little bit with some structured group activities and find the value in really using that group class time for collaborative work, for higher level thinking skills, and for making connections, which are incredibly valuable to our students. So switching, again, having those flipped materials, having the videos available, having workbook pieces to follow, having group activities planned really does transfer over super nicely into a traditional lecture format while still preserving that concept of maybe your regular flipped classroom for an instructor that's more comfortable with that. This one is maybe much more familiar to all of us right now, right? Is switching from having a flipped classroom to virtual synchronous. We started this, started this change to this flipped curriculum, and we've just been doing one class at a time. But our first class was completely developed when the pandemic hit, and it was amazing because all of the video lectures were all prepared, right, ready to roll. We had lecture support for all of those, and then we could kind of fumble through Zoom as we were learning things together, right, for the first time. We could use the class time to, again, focus on clarifying misconceptions, answering those student questions. We could tackle some more difficult problems. We could still do a lot of those grouped activities in a virtual synchronous session using breakout rooms. And so having all of those pieces and that flipped curriculum made those courses just an absolute dream to walk into, right? You were able to say, oh, here's videos, you're all set. Here's some good ideas for how to use class time. And then that just transferred over seamlessly. And we worked really fast to try to get as many other courses in this format as we could as the pandemic continued. Another really popular modality that we have is hybrid. And again, your traditional hybrid, you're meeting in class for some and you're offline for other work. And that really is what this flipped concept is dealing with, right? Is looking at individual learning space and then having that group activity time that you can work on. Really, the hybrid modality is sometimes a little bit more challenging to work with because you have less group time. And so you really have to think about the breakdown between the individual space and the group space a little bit more deeply. As you're looking at those connections, prioritize using that face-to-face time to establish community. Relationships are so important to student success. Study after study shows us this and demonstrates that this is just really, really critical. And so spend that time in that limited time when you're with your students in a hybrid setting to focus on collaborative work, building that community. Because you often have less time in a hybrid course in terms of that group time, choosing some of those easier in-class activities as things that can be done outside of class. So again, trying to focus on getting some of those lower level thinking skills outside of the group time, and then really, really focusing on those synthesizing knowledge, the critical thinking, putting all those pieces together. You really want to focus on that during your in-class time. Again, making connections to both previous and future learning. The connections are things that students don't generally see automatically on their own. They really need to be directed, shown, and inspired by how everything ties together. And that's really hard to do in a 3 to 5 minute video. Much easier to do in a group learning space where you can kind of talk about things, analyze, and do some activities associated with that. So really focusing in class time in a hybrid setting on those specialized pieces, super, super valuable. The last recommendation that I have here is to rethink your traditional assessments. A lot of times people use, and I'm only sharing these because these are all mistakes I've made over decades, right? And things that I've learned. I used to think that in a hybrid class, that was the best time for me to give exams. So I would have like a group activity one week and an exam another week, and a group activity one week and an exam another week. And to be honest, those traditional assessments of in-class exams, sitting down, where you're watching 30 people take a test is not really a very good use of group time, especially when it's limited. So think about other ways that you can develop those assessments to not, I still think they're super important, right? We need individual accountability. We want to know that each person has developed a background and certain skills that they can use in their, if they get put in another situation, if they get put in another class. So being able to rethink what those assessments are and move them into the individual group space. If they're sitting at a table by themselves in your class, you're not using it as a group learning space. So think about other ways that you can move those traditional assessments offline. And we've all become much more expert in doing this sort of thing recently, right? As we've often been, as we've been forced to have to do a lot of testing outside of a regular classroom setting. So think about how you can maybe implement that on a more regular basis, again, to really focus that group, that limited precious group time that you have for what you need here. And of course, flipped is really a good first step to running a fully online class. You have the lesson materials ready to go in a digital format. I always have like a learn by reading, learn by watching option for my online students that I kind of get. And so students can either read a textbook version of what's going on, or they can watch my videos. And so being able to do that in a fully online class, they can choose the method that they want to learn with. And if they need further clarification, they can look at the other version, right? I have a lot of students that'll watch the videos, and then if they get stuck or as they're doing their homework, they'll look at the textbook examples as additional things that they can follow. When we're flipping to fully online, you lose a lot of that group space, right? That fully online class becomes very individualized. So providing additional scaffolding for students on those more challenging projects becomes an important step. We do a lot of scaffolding live in our class for larger group activities, for projects, for analysis. And if you're in a fully online class, that scaffolding is missing in your instructions. So being able to build that in, maybe show a video walkthrough of what you're looking for in a project, being able to provide a little bit of those additional steps from the flipped curriculum into the fully online. Those are good supplements that you can make to support that lack of group learning space that we have. In a similar vein there, not just scaffolding for assignments, but maybe a wrap-up experience or explanation, right? Those tying things together, those connections, those why it matters, right? Think about having some sort of a closing unit to bring that out. Because again, by breaking things up into individual skills and lower level thinking videos, sometimes things get very segmented. And so really think about, as you take that flipped curriculum to the fully online, make sure you include that concept of bringing connections together for your students in that offline, in the online setting, in the out of class setting. And then my last recommendation here is to look for ways to build community without adding student frustration. I used to require every student make 3 posts on a discussion board every week. That became really stressful and non-meaningful. So think about ways that you can maybe, for a math class, right? And they're still doing homework, they're still doing these other things. So think about other ways that you can maybe do some of this community set. Is there a way that you can pair things up? A couple of things I found are very helpful for a fully online class is I hold a live review session. And sometimes, usually 2, I'll do a daytime and an evening one, because I know a lot of students take fully online courses because they are working full time and things like that. And so I'll host a session where students can come in and talk to each other, review with me live, and I'll record those sessions for students that aren't able to be there. But being able to remind students that they're part of a community, they're not learning alone, those things become really valuable. I started making discussion board posts into an extra point on a quiz, right? I don't want to, I have let students take quizzes every week over the material, but they often make little silly mistakes all the time. So if you post a question on the discussion board, so you're thinking, you're contributing to the course, you can get an extra point on your quiz, for example. And so some of those ways help inspire people to work and in the community of learners in that fully online space that you really lose from our more traditional classrooms. So these have been really useful things for me in terms of once I have that flipped design, I can give these materials to any instructor and they can adapt them in a fairly straightforward fashion. The last modality that I like to think about here is switching from flipped to kind of a co-requisite support. Share the stuff that you're doing. This stuff is so valuable and you put so much time into developing and creating these. So think about ways that you can share the stuff that you're making, the things that you're writing. A lot of my developmental ed courses are slated to become co-requisite courses with 100-level classes. So a student could take a 100-level class if they were not quite prepared for that math and have kind of this background course going on at the same time to give them that extra support. Well, having all those flipped lecture materials available to kind of slide over into that co-requisite course, it's almost done already. I also will use these co-requisite, or I'll use my flipped materials that I've designed as remediation in future classes. So, you know, if I'm teaching a calculus lesson and they have to do factoring and you find you've got a student, if you don't quite remember how to factor, here are some videos that you can do and some practice problems that you can do. So use your materials, send them along, use them as skill reviews for other programs. If you have maybe a trig lesson you can send it to the physics teacher. So when they're introducing something that uses your math skills, great, they can adapt that. Or if someone in a psychology class is getting ready to write a paper, maybe an English teacher that developed a flipped classroom will have some materials that instructor could use to help students prepare for that flipped situation. You can use them to help tutoring centers, and of course, share with the world. Publish your YouTube playlists. Add your materials to popular OER repositories. You know, add yourself to the Pressbooks directory. However, you're getting those materials ready to share out. And that's easy to do with flipped because so much of it is in a digital format already. I went through a lot of the best practices and things that I learned, but just a couple of things here. Keep your video short. People, that just kind of a basic design thing. Teacher created work means a lot. Having a single voice presenting the lectures gives a cohesiveness to what's going on. And the students love it if it's you. I've taught online classes and then had students come into the tutoring center and they're like, I knew it was you because I heard your voice. Right? And they could find me on campus, even though they'd never seen me before. Be okay giving up your favorite activities. Being intentional in your design means that every activity is meeting a course objective. So being available and okay to give up some of those favorite things to make sure that they're walking away with the skills you want them to have. And then really rethink your role. You know, is it really important for me to stand up in front of everybody? Well, record it, right? And then use that time where you can be the expert, help them find their misconceptions, help them really draw out what students are learning as they go through. And these are some of the successes that I found. Super flexible for instructor teaching styles, right? You've put a lot of work into a curriculum redesign. Any instructor in any modality can really benefit from those materials. It's super flexible for students in need, even if you're using a traditional set. Second language learners love, people that work full-time love having those videos that they can go back and review and rewind if they're tired, if they want to be able to look at things or watch or even just review for an exam. I found a lot more increased student engagement if I'm not just lecturing, right? They're involved, they are doing active learning and you can see it. I found I'm able to give a lot more individual attention. For a lot of these courses, if they did remedial practice work, I have them come to class and do 3 problems and bring them to my desk. And I could see every student's individual work within 10 minutes. It was awesome because a lot of times you don't even say hello to every single individual student. But with having some of that flipped instruction time, those basics, that vocabulary done offline, let me really use that time in class to communicate and establish relationships with my students. And again, that intentional design, meaningful activities, everything that happens in my class happens for a reason. It's planned, it's deliberate, and designing for flipped allows me to be able to do Anyway, I thank you so much for attending. This has been such a part of my teaching for the last 5 years. I have learned so much, and I feel like my students are comprehending things so much better than they ever did before by switching to this format. And I just, now that I'm department chair and I have new adjuncts and new faculty that I need to bring on board and help, having pre-done curriculum in this flipped format has just been a lifesaver. And every instructor is able to take that material and run with it in whatever mode they need to. Feel free to contact me anytime, sherry.mclean@lwtech.edu. That I am always happy to chat pedagogy with anyone that's interested. And if you have any ideas of things, feel free to share them with me. I'm always working to get better. Anyway, I probably talked longer than I meant to. Greg, do we have a few questions in chat that we can tackle?
Yeah, first of all, Sherry, thanks for your presentation today and your enthusiasm. You can tell from your voice and your presentation style that this is a really interesting topic for you, and we really appreciate you sharing your enthusiasm with us today. Just because of the way we have Zoom set up, we do have kind of a hard stop in just a few minutes, but there are a couple questions in the chat. So let me, I don't know if we'll get through both of them, but let me ask the first one. So to you, Sherry, how do you ensure that a person doing a video aligns with instruction of other instructors? I've seen a disconnect between instructor teaching and the videos.
Yeah, and I think that really becomes, I've started doing things like student work along workbooks and things like that. And this is also why having a single voice is really important. It's real easy to say, I'm going to grab a video from this person and this person and this person, but it becomes very disjointed. And especially with something like mathematics, if you don't have a single voice talking through, a lot of those videos will assume maybe something that isn't in your logical order. So kind of being able to have a standard set base for that really becomes important. And it really is just a discussion I have with my adjuncts when I share with them. Like, these are the developments that we have. So as you're teaching the class, kind of keep this in mind, because they haven't learned this skill yet. And so I usually have, a 45-minute hour discussion where we go through the materials. And I do recommend that they watch all of the videos so they can kind of see what's going on before they teach, so they know what the students are seeing. There's nothing worse than presenting two different things in different ways to confuse students on a topic that they're already worried about.
Great, thank you, Sherry. You know what? I think we can sneak in one other question. So this is from Vicki Klein. Do you have any recommendations for high flex situations where half the class is online and half is face-to-face for each session?
I think the key is really those personal experiences that they're having. If those are set up really well, then you can kind of do those in-class sets where you're having that high level discussion, using breakout rooms for the people that are online, and then having tables and then just switching your time around. The high flex is a real challenge, but it is such a benefit to students who can't make it into class anymore. I mean, we really need to become more and more flexible. So the more scaffolding that you can do in those in-class experiences really transfers over just delightfully when you try to bring things together when you're sharing with your students. And having all of that set up in a nicely organized Canvas shell, right, in terms of having students be able to find all the materials that they need, really can keep that moving smoothly.
Great. Well, Sherry, we are kind of at the end of the Zoom time. I would encourage people, if it's okay with Sherry, she did put her email address, and I think she's more than willing to accept any questions that you might have following the presentation today. Is that true, Sherry? I guess I should have asked you first.
Absolutely. I am just delighted to talk about any of this with anyone. If you have questions, whether it's about math in specific or flipped in general, I am happy to have any.
I thought you would be. So again, thank you, Sherry, for participating and presenting today. Much appreciated from the committee. For the attendees, thank you for attending. Please fill out the presentation evaluation. I put the link in chat for you. And hope that you are enjoying the conference so far. I think we're kind of at the lunchtime break, although I'm not sure we really get a break, but enjoy yourself for the rest of the day and for the next couple days too. And Sherry, I hope you can participate in some of their presentations going forward as well.
I've got my schedule all lined up, so.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, everyone.
I hope to see you in some of the sessions.
Bye-bye.
Bye.